Have you ever heard of a man so rich he broke the economy of an entire country just by visiting? A man whose wealth was so vast, so unimaginable, that modern economists can't even put a number on it. This isn't a character from a fantasy novel. This is the story of the wealthiest human being who ever lived, Mansa Musa, the Golden King of Mali. Forget today's billionaires. Their fortunes are just a drop in the ocean compared to Mansa Musa. In the early 14th century, he ruled over the Malian Empire, a sprawling West African kingdom that was the world's largest producer of gold. At a time when Europe was struggling through famine and war, Mali was a shining beacon of prosperity and power. The source of this incredible wealth, massive, seemingly endless gold mines under his control. The empire held nearly half of the old world's gold, and it all belonged to him. But it wasn't until his legendary pilgrimage to Mecca in 1324 that the world truly understood the scale of his riches. This was no ordinary journey, it was a procession of epic proportions. Imagine a caravan stretching for miles across the Sahara Desert. 60,000 men, including soldiers, officials, and entertainers. And leading this immense train were thousands of servants and camels, each carrying pure gold. Not coins, but solid gold bars and dust, weighing hundreds of pounds. As he traveled, Mansa Musa gave gold away to everyone he met. He handed it out to the poor, showered local leaders with gifts, and built a new mosque every single Friday. When his caravan reached Cairo, the capital of Egypt, he spent so lavishly that the sheer amount of gold he injected into the city's economy caused chaos. The value of gold plummeted, and it took the region over a decade to recover from the inflation he single-handedly created. He literally changed the price of gold across the entire Mediterranean. Eyewitnesses were left speechless. They described him as a powerful, dignified ruler, adorned in silk and gold, but it was his generosity that left the biggest impression. He wasn't just showing off his wealth, he was putting his empire on the map. Before this journey, many in the Middle East and Europe had only vague ideas about West Africa. After Mansa Musa's pilgrimage, Mali was known as a land of legendary riches and sophistication. European cartographers began drawing his figure on their maps, a majestic African king holding a golden nugget. But Mansa Musa's legacy is about so much more than just gold. He was a visionary leader who used his immense wealth to transform his kingdom into a world-class center of learning and culture. On his way back from Mecca, he brought back the greatest minds of the Islamic world: architects, scholars, and poets. He commissioned the construction of magnificent mosques and libraries in cities like Timbuktu and Gao. Under his rule, Timbuktu became a legendary intellectual hub, home to a university that rivaled the best in the world. It attracted students and professors from all over Africa and the Middle East. The city's libraries housed hundreds of thousands of manuscripts on everything from astronomy and medicine to law and philosophy. Mansa Musa wasn't just the richest man in history. He was a nation builder, a patron of the arts and sciences who turned his golden empire into a golden age of knowledge. His story challenges everything we think we know about wealth, power, and history. It's a reminder that some of the world's greatest empires and most influential figures have been written out of the popular narrative. The tale of Mansa Musa is one of unimaginable wealth, yes, but it's also a story of ambition, faith, and the enduring power of knowledge. He built a legacy that was worth far more than gold, one that still echoes through history today.
History isn't just what happened, it's what was hidden. Welcome to the Chrono archives, where lost empires rise again, forgotten legends speak, and ancient truths are brought back to life. From world-shaping history and powerful myths to legendary rulers and timeless civilizations, every story here is carefully uncovered, deeply researched, and cinematically told. The past is calling, will you answer? Subscribe and journey through time, one unforgettable chronicle at a time.
He crashed the economies of entire nations just by passing through. It sounds like a myth, a line from a fantasy epic. But this is the true story of a man whose wealth was so vast, it defied imagination. A man whose journey across the desert reshaped the world, yet whose name has been largely erased from our history books. This is the story of Mansa Musa, the richest human being who ever lived, and the empire he built that changed the world. For centuries, the narrative of history has been curated, edited, and often deliberately broken. We are taught about Rome, Greece, and the dynasties of the East. But what about the superpowers of Africa? What about the Mali Empire, a civilization that, in the 14th century, was a global center of wealth, learning, and power? This isn't just a footnote to history, this is history itself. To understand this era, we must first journey back to the very lands that gave it birth. West Africa, a vast expanse of savanna, river, and desert. It was here, along the fertile banks of the Niger River and across the punishing sands of the Sahara, that the arteries of global trade pulsed with life. For 1,000 years, two resources defined this land: salt from the north, as valuable as life itself, and gold from the south, a seemingly endless supply that dazzled the known world. Great empires rose and fell controlling these trade routes. First, the Ghana Empire, a mighty kingdom whose rulers were known as the Lords of Gold. But empires, like all things, are mortal. By the 13th century, Ghana's power was waning, creating a vacuum, an opportunity for a new legend to be born. From the ashes of Ghana rose Mali. Its founding is the stuff of epic poetry, the story of a disabled prince, Sundiata Keita, the Lion King. Cast out and exiled, he returned not with vengeance, but with a vision. He united the warring clans, defeated his enemies, and forged a new, greater empire. Sundiata established a system of government built on a federation of tribes, a constitution that balanced power, and a deep sense of justice. The Keita dynasty he began would rule for centuries, but it was his grandnephew who would take Mali's incredible wealth and power and show it to the world. So, who was this man? Mansa Musa. The title Mansa means King of Kings, or Emperor. He inherited the throne not through a simple line of succession, but because his predecessor, Abu Bakr II, was an explorer. Obsessed with the limits of the Atlantic Ocean, Abu Bakr abdicated the throne, outfitted 2,000 ships, and sailed west into the unknown, never to return. Musa, his regent, became the 9th Mansa of Mali. He was a devout Muslim, a skilled administrator, and a brilliant intellectual. His rule was not defined by brute force, but by diplomacy, faith, and a profound understanding of global economics. While European kings were often warring feudal lords in muddy castles, Mansa Musa presided over a sophisticated urban empire commanding a professional army of 100,000 men and controlling the source of more than half the world's gold. His ambition was not just to rule, but to build a legacy. And that legacy would be cemented by a single, monumental act, the Hajj, the sacred pilgrimage to Mecca. This journey would not be a quiet, solitary affair. It would be a procession that the world would never forget. For a year, the empire prepared. Imagine the scale: 60,000 people. A caravan of men, women, soldiers, doctors, and scholars stretching for miles across the desert. 12,000 attendants, each dressed in silks and brocades. And the camels, hundreds of camels, each one loaded with up to 300 pounds of pure, glittering gold dust. In 1324, this golden city on the move began its 3,000-mile trek. As it passed through Cairo, the largest city outside of Mali's influence, the world truly took notice. Musa's generosity was legendary. He gave gold to the poor, to the merchants, to the Sultan of Egypt. He spent so much, so freely, that he single-handedly flooded the market. The value of gold in Cairo plummeted, and its economy took over a decade to recover. Arab scholars like Al-Umari, who visited Cairo years later, were still writing about it. They described Musa not as arrogant, but as noble, dignified, and powerful. His pilgrimage wasn't just an act of faith, it was a geopolitical statement. Mali had arrived on the world stage, and it demanded to be seen. Musa returned from Mecca a changed man, with a new vision for his empire. He brought back with him the greatest minds of the Islamic world, architects, poets, and scholars. His goal was to turn his cities into centers of learning that would rival any on earth. He focused on Timbuktu. Under his patronage, the city transformed from a dusty trading post into a metropolis of knowledge. He commissioned the legendary Gingerbread Mosque, a marvel of Sahelian architecture that still stands today. Great universities like Sankar were expanded, their libraries filled with hundreds of thousands of manuscripts on law, astronomy, and philosophy. Students from across Africa and the Middle East flocked to Timbuktu to study. This was not a primitive kingdom. It was the intellectual capital of an entire continent, a beacon of light and learning. Mali became the envy of the medieval world, its name synonymous with gold and wisdom. But the Golden Age could not last forever. After a reign of 25 years, Mansa Musa died, leaving behind a vast and complex empire. His successors lacked his vision and skill. His son, Megan, was a weak ruler who squandered much of the treasury. Internal rebellions began to fracture the empire from within, while rival powers like the Songhai Empire grew stronger on its borders. The unity that Sundiata had forged and Musa had perfected began to crumble. Then, a new threat arrived, not from the desert, but from the sea. In the 15th century, Portuguese ships appeared on the West African coast, seeking gold and slaves. This was the beginning of the end. The arrival of Europeans fundamentally shifted global trade routes, bypassing the old trans-Saharan network that had been Mali's lifeblood. Over the next few centuries, colonial powers would systematically dismantle, conquer, and exploit the remnants of West Africa's great empires. But their conquest was not just military and economic, it was historical. They needed to justify their actions, so they rewrote the narrative. They depicted Africa as a land of darkness, without history, culture, or civilization before their arrival. The story of Mali was deliberately buried, maps were redrawn. The epic of Mansa Musa, the king who broke economies with his generosity, was erased. So why does Mansa Musa still matter today? Because his story is a powerful reminder of a history that was stolen. It challenges the narratives we have been taught and forces us to ask, what else don't we know? His leadership was not based on conquest alone, but on building institutions, fostering knowledge, and using immense wealth to create a cultural legacy. He demonstrates that Africa has always been a continent of great empires, profound ideas, and global influence. Reclaiming his story is part of a larger cultural reclamation, a necessary act of correcting the historical record and restoring dignity to a forgotten past. We began with a mystery, a man whose wealth was beyond measure, whose journey shook the world. A king whose story seems too grand to be true. But Mansa Musa was real. The Mali Empire was real. Its universities and its golden cities were real. The silence that followed was not an accident of time. History did not forget Mansa Musa, it chose not to remember. But the truth, like gold, can only be buried for so long. Eventually, it finds its way back to the light. Thank you for watching. Mansa Musa's story isn't just about gold. To see it that way is to miss the point entirely. The sheer scale of his wealth is staggering, almost mythical, but the gold was merely a tool, a means to an end. It was the catalyst for a legacy that has echoed through centuries, long after the last speck of dust from his caravan settled. When we think of the richest person in history, our minds conjure images of glittering palaces, overflowing vaults, a life of unimaginable luxury. And while Mansa Musa certainly had all of that, his true fortune wasn't something you could hold. It was built, not mined. It was forged in the hearts and minds of his people, in the foundations of the institutions he created. His legendary pilgrimage to Mecca wasn't just a display of piety or power. It was a seismic event that literally redrew the maps of the world. He put his empire, Mali, and by extension, West Africa, on the global stage. For the first time, European and Middle Eastern cartographers depicted this region not as a blank space, but as a land of immense wealth, culture, and influence. He forced the world to look south, to acknowledge a thriving civilization they had ignored. The gold he famously distributed didn't just make him a legend. It temporarily crashed the economy of Cairo. Imagine that. One man's generosity, his sheer presence, altering the financial fabric of a major world city. It demonstrates a power that transcends armies and borders the power to give, to build, and to transform. But even that is just a footnote in his real story. The real treasure he brought back from his journey wasn't gold or jewels, but knowledge. He returned with architects, scholars, poets, and jurists. He turned Timbuktu from a remote trading post into a world-renowned center of learning and culture, a beacon of intellectual light. The Sankar University became a place where students from across the Muslim world came to study law, medicine, astronomy, and art. This was his real investment, not in gold bars, but in human potential. He understood that an empire built on knowledge is far more enduring than one built on precious metals. The libraries of Timbuktu, filled with hundreds of thousands of manuscripts, were his true vaults. Mansa Musa's reign reminds us that power isn't about what you can take, but what you can create. It's about fostering an environment where art, science, and faith can flourish. His mosques, with their unique Sadano-Sahelian architecture, still stand today, testaments to a vision that blended faith with local identity. They are more than just buildings, they are symbols of a golden age, a time when a West African empire was at the very heart of global progress. So, as the dust of history settles, what remains of Mansa Musa? The gold is gone, spent, and scattered across continents. The empire has faded, its borders now lines on modern maps, but the legacy is indelible. It lives on in the architectural marvels of Jen and Timbuktu. It whispers from the pages of ancient manuscripts saved from destruction. It resonates in the pride of a continent whose history is rich, profound, and profoundly undervalued. Mansa Musa challenges our very definition of wealth. He forces us to look beyond the material, beyond the fleeting glitter of gold, and to consider the permanence of ideas, the power of education, and the impact of a single vision. His story proves that a person's true worth is not measured by the fortune they accumulate in their lifetime, but by the legacy they leave for generations to come. After all, what is the value of a mountain of gold if it builds nothing that lasts?
As we close this chapter of the Chrono archives, remember, the past is never truly gone. It waits patiently in the shadows of forgotten ruins, in the echoes of ancient voices, and in the timeless lessons that still guide us today. It waits to be remembered by curious minds like yours. Thank you for joining us on this extraordinary journey through the annals of time. If today's exploration of lost civilizations, mythical legends, or historical enigmas ignited your passion for the past, hit that like button. Drop a comment with your favorite moment or what you'd love to see next, and most importantly, subscribe to the Chrono Archives and continue the journey through time. Turn on notifications so you never miss an episode where we unearth buried secrets, decode ancient mysteries, and bring history's greatest stories back to life. Together, we'll keep the flame of the past burning bright. Until next time, fellow time travelers, keep questioning, keep discovering, and keep remembering. The Chrono Archives, where the past lives forever.